The warning came at dawn. Sarah's perimeter sensors detected multiple vehicles approaching the facility from different directions. On her monitors, she counted 4 military helicopters and 6 armored personnel carriers. This was no random patrol. "They're here," she announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The beings, now nearly the size of horses, immediately tensed. Over the past 5 months, they had grown not just in size but in power. Nova's command over matter had reached atomic levels. Void could create spatial distortions visible to the naked eye. Flux had become a living energy nexus. Sarah's computer chimed with an incoming transmission. "Dr. Chen," a stern voice crackled through her speakers. "This is Colonel Hayes of the Strategic Extraterrestrial Defense Initiative. We know about your guests. The facility is surrounded. Please surrender yourself and the specimens for the safety of national security." Nova touched Sarah's hand, sharing a rapid series of images. The being's emotions were clear. They could escape easily, transform the entire mountain into energy if necessary. But Sarah shook her head. No, too many innocent people would die. Through their mental link, the beings shared their concern. The cosmic threat was now just weeks away. They needed more time to reach full maturity, to be ready for the battle ahead. Being taken into military custody would doom not just them, but potentially all of humanity. "Dr. Chen," the colonel's voice came again. "You have 5 minutes to comply before we take action." Sarah closed her eyes, thinking rapidly. Over the months, she had prepared for this possibility, but she had hoped to have more time. "Show me," she commanded softly. The beings combined their abilities, creating a holographic display of Earth's solar system. A massive dark mass approached from the outer rim, its presence distorting space itself. According to their calculations, it would reach Earth in exactly 27 days. The facility's walls shuddered as the military vehicles took position. Sarah could hear the whine of charging energy weapons. They had come prepared for extraterrestrial resistance. "What you're protecting in there could change everything we know about the universe," Colonel Hayes tried again. "Think about the advancement of human knowledge." Sarah laughed bitterly. "That's exactly what I am thinking about." She turned to her charges, who watched her with those impossibly intelligent eyes. "We're out of options. We need to show them the truth." The beings shared their agreement through their link. They had grown to trust Sarah's judgment implicitly. If she believed revealing themselves was necessary, they would follow her lead. "Colonel," Sarah activated her comm system. "I'm coming out, but I need to show you something first, something that will explain everything." She uploaded the being's data about the approaching threat to her main screen, along with all her research and observations. "I'm transmitting data to you now. Before you take any action, before you think about weapons or containment, look at what's coming for Earth." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could imagine the military analysts poring over the data, their worldview shifting with each new revelation. "This is..." Colonel Hayes's voice had lost its commanding edge. "This can't be real." "Oh, it's real," Sarah confirmed. "And those specimens you want to capture? They're our only defense against it. They were sent here to protect us, Colonel. Not as weapons for us to study or control, but as guardians." Through the facility's cameras, she watched the colonel emerge from his vehicle, tablet in hand, staring at the data with a mixture of horror and awe. "Even if what you're saying is true, Dr. Chen, protocols must be followed. We need to..." The colonel's words cut off as the sky above them suddenly darkened. Sarah rushed to her instruments, but she already knew what they would show. The being's predictions had been wrong. The cosmic entity wasn't coming in 27 days. It was already here. Nova, Void, and Flux moved as one, their bodies glowing with power. Through their link, Sarah felt their determination, their readiness to fulfill their purpose. But she also felt their fear, not for themselves, but for her, for humanity. They weren't yet at full strength. The battle ahead would be desperate. "Colonel," Sarah's voice was firm, as she opened the facility's main doors. "I suggest we postpone my arrest. We have more pressing matters to attend to." The beings emerged into the morning light, their true forms now visible to the assembled military force. Their beauty and power were breathtaking, 3 manifestations of cosmic forces made flesh. The soldiers raised their weapons instinctively, but Colonel Hayes held up his hand. He had seen enough in the data to understand. Sometimes survival meant throwing away the rulebook. Sometimes it meant trusting in wonders you couldn't fully understand. Above them, the sky continued to darken as humanity's greatest challenge approached. But they weren't facing it alone. They had guardians sent across the stars to stand with them. And they had Sarah Chin, who had chosen love and wonder over protocol, and in doing so, might have saved her entire species. 3 months after the hatching, Sarah's mountain laboratory had become something between a high-tech research facility and an alien nursery. The beings grew at an astonishing rate, each now the size of a large dog, and their abilities had developed far beyond her initial expectations. Nova, the first to hatch, had mastered molecular manipulation. Sarah watched in amazement as it transformed a steel cabinet into pure energy, then reconstructed it atom by atom. More concerning was its tendency to experiment with any new object it encountered, leading to several destroyed pieces of expensive equipment. "Nova, we've talked about this," Sarah sighed, examining the remains of her mass spectrometer. "Just because you can deconstruct something doesn't mean you should." The creature responded with a series of harmonious tones that she'd learned meant something between apology and scientific curiosity. Void had developed abilities that seemed to defy the laws of physics. It could create localized areas of altered gravity, compress space between 2 points, and even generate small temporal anomalies. Sarah had nearly had a heart attack the first time she saw it casually fold space to reach a treat she'd placed on a high shelf. Flux, true to its name, had become a master of energy manipulation. It could absorb, store, and redirect any form of energy it encountered. This proved particularly useful when Nova's experiments went wrong, or when Void's gravity wells got out of control. However, its growing power levels were becoming harder to contain within the lab's shielding. The being's intelligence had grown as rapidly as their abilities. They communicated with each other through a complex language of tones, colors, and electromagnetic pulses. More importantly, they had developed a sophisticated way of sharing thoughts and images with Sarah through direct contact. These communications were becoming increasingly complex, hinting at knowledge far beyond Earth's current understanding of physics. "Your growth rate is unprecedented," Sarah noted into her recorder, watching as Void demonstrated its latest ability, creating a miniature black hole to safely dispose of some hazardous waste. "But I'm concerned about containment. The energy signatures are becoming harder to mask, and—" An alarm blared through the facility. Sarah rushed to her monitoring stations, heart pounding. The satellite feeds showed a military helicopter approaching from the west. "Down," she commanded sharply. The beings immediately responded, their training kicking in. Nova shifted its coloring to match the lab's walls, while Void created a small spatial pocket to hide within. Flux simply transformed into pure energy, merging with the facility's power grid. The helicopter passed overhead, close enough to rattle the windows. Sarah held her breath, watching its trajectory on her screens. After what felt like hours, it continued east, probably on routine patrol. She exhaled slowly, her hands shaking as she switched off the alarm. "We can't keep doing this," she said softly as her charges emerged from hiding. "You're growing too powerful, too quickly. Sooner or later, someone's going to notice." Nova approached, touching its forehead to her hand. Images flooded her mind. Stars, vast distances, and something new. A sense of urgency of time running out. Void and Flux joined the connection, and suddenly Sarah was overwhelmed with information. She saw glimpses of their origin, their purpose, and a looming threat that made her blood run cold. "You're not just visitors, are you?" she whispered. "You're a warning." The beings confirmed her realization, with a series of solemn tones. Through their mental link, Sarah began to understand the truth. These creatures hadn't come to Earth by accident. They were sent, engineered and deployed across the galaxy as sentinels, guardians created by an ancient civilization to prepare younger races for what was coming. As if to emphasize the point, Flux created a holographic display in the air between them. Sarah watched in horror as the image showed a massive dark shape moving through space, consuming everything in its path. The scale was impossible to comprehend. Entire star systems vanished into its maw. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The answer came in a series of clear images: Earth's orbital position, stellar alignments, and a sense of rapid movement. Sarah's scientific mind calculated quickly. 6 months, she breathed. We have 6 months before it reaches our solar system. Nova pressed closer, sharing another image. The 3 beings, fully grown, standing against the darkness. They were Earth's defense system, sent to protect humanity. But they needed time to mature, to reach their full potential. And they needed Sarah to keep them safe until then. The weight of this knowledge settled over her like a physical force. She had thought she was protecting 3 fascinating alien specimens. Instead, she was harboring humanity's only hope for survival against a threat beyond imagination. As if sensing her distress, the beings surrounded her, their presence reassuring. Through their connection, they shared not just information but emotion, determination, hope, and something very much like love. "Well," Sarah said, straightening her shoulders, "I guess we better step up your training." The changes began 3 weeks after Sarah brought the eggs to her facility. She first noticed it during her morning readings, subtle variations in the energy signatures that pulsed through the crystalline shells. The patterns had grown more complex, almost like neural activity. Sarah had spent those weeks in near isolation, telling colleagues she was working on a sensitive project. Her lab, perched high in the mountains, had become both sanctuary and prison. Every day brought new discoveries that she couldn't share, new questions she couldn't ask her peers. The eggs had grown slightly, their surfaces now rippling with colors that seemed to respond to sound and movement. Sarah found herself talking to them constantly, describing her observations, sharing her theories. Sometimes she could swear they listened. "The internal temperature is rising again," she noted into her recorder one evening, watching the readouts. 0.3 degrees in the last hour. Energy output has increased by 12%, and the crystalline matrix is showing signs off. A crack split the air like a gunshot. Sarah spun toward the incubator. A fine line had appeared across the surface of the leftmost egg, glowing with intense white light. As she watched, frozen between scientific observation and instinctive fear, more cracks spread across its surface. "Time is 22:47, she spoke shakily into her recorder. "Subject Alpha is showing signs of emergence." The shell didn't so much break as dissolve, the crystalline surface turning to a fine mist that sparkled in the lab's lights before dissipating. What emerged made Sarah question everything she thought she knew about biology. The creature was about the size of a house cat, with a serpentine body covered in scales that seemed to shift between states of matter. As it moved, its surface rippled like liquid metal, but when still, it appeared solid as steel. 4 limbs ended in delicate, almost hand-like appendages, and a pair of wings, or what she thought were wings, shimmered like aurora borealis given form. Its head was elegant, almost avian, with eyes that shone with intelligence. Those eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her breath catch. There was no fear in that gaze, only curiosity and something else. Recognition. Before she could process this, the second egg began to crack. This emergence was different. The shell fractured in a geometric pattern, each piece dissolving into particles of light. The creature that emerged was similar in size to the first, but built differently, more compact, with scales that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its wings were more substantial, and as it stretched them, Sarah felt a slight change in air pressure within the lab. The third hatching began almost immediately after. This egg split cleanly in half, revealing a being that seemed to bridge the characteristics of its siblings. Its scales shifted colors like oil on water, and its form seemed more fluid, able to stretch and compress as it explored its surroundings. Sarah stood motionless, her scientific mind warring with awe as the three beings oriented themselves in their new environment. They moved with purpose, exploring their surroundings with obvious intelligence. Then, as if reaching a unanimous decision, they turned to face her. The first one made a sound, not quite a chirp, not quite a hum, that resonated at a frequency she felt in her bones. To her shock, she realized they were communicating, not just with each other, but attempting to communicate with her. "Hello," she whispered, kneeling slowly to their level. "I'm Sarah." The response was immediate. All three moved toward her with a grace that defied physics. The first one reached her hand, touching it with what she could only describe as a snout. The contact sent a jolt through her system, not painful, but intense. Images flooded her mind. Stars, vast distances, purpose. They were trying to tell her something. As the other two joined their sibling, each making contact with her, Sarah realized she had stumbled upon something far beyond simple alien life. These beings weren't just extraterrestrial. They were messengers, created and sent with intent. The real question was, by whom and why? The first creature, she would later name it Nova for its stellar energy signature, curled around her arm, its body temperature matching hers perfectly. The second, which she would call Void for its light-absorbing properties, took up position on her shoulder, while the third, soon to be named Flux, settled in her lap. As she sat there, surrounded by impossible beings that seemed to have chosen her as their guardian, Sarah Chen realized her life's work had just begun. She had prepared herself for the possibility of discovering alien life, but nothing could have prepared her for this, becoming surrogate mother to creatures that defied explanation. "Well," she said softly, watching as Nova experimented with changing the molecular structure of a nearby pencil, "I guess we're going to learn a lot from each other." She had no idea just how prophetic those words would prove to be. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the impact crater, her environmental suit's sensors quietly cataloging the unusual readings. The meteorite had struck the Mongolian steppes 3 months ago, but something about this site defied conventional analysis. The crater's walls sparkled with an iridescent sheen that no known mineral could explain, and the air temperature remained inexplicably elevated despite the harsh winter wind. "Control, I'm getting some unusual readings here," Sarah reported into her comm unit. "The radiation signature doesn't match anything in our database." She carefully made her way down the crater's slope, her boots crunching on the crystalline surface. The research station had sent her to collect samples, but as she descended deeper into the crater, Sarah felt an inexplicable pull toward its center. 20 years of scientific training told her to maintain objectivity, yet something about this place resonated with her on an almost primal level. The crater's heart held a secret. Partially buried in the glittering soil lay 3 crystalline structures, each roughly the size of a basketball. They pulsed with an inner light that shifted through colors she had no names for. Sarah's hand tremored as she reached out to touch one, her suit's sensors screaming warnings about unknown energy signatures. The surface was warm. Not the residual heat of impact, but a living warmth that seemed to respond to her touch. "These aren't minerals," she whispered to herself, her scientific mind racing to process what her instincts already knew. "They're eggs." The realization should have terrified her. Protocol dictated immediate quarantine and notification of the Planetary Defense Council. Any potential extraterrestrial life form required the highest level of containment and study. But as she knelt there, feeling the gentle pulse of life beneath her gloved hands, Sarah made a decision that would alter the course of human history. She switched off her comm unit. The next few hours passed in a blur of careful preparation. Sarah had brought specimen containers meant for rock samples, but with some modification, they could maintain the eggs' temperature and protect them during transport. She worked methodically, her training battling with the urgency she felt as the sun began to set over the steppes. "I must be losing my mind," she muttered, securing the last container. The egg's glow had intensified as darkness fell, casting ethereal patterns across the crater walls. She knew she was betraying everything she believed in as a scientist, but something deeper than logic drove her actions. The drive back to her private research facility was tense. Every bump in the road made her wince, imagining damage to her precious cargo. Sarah had built her reputation on methodical research and peer-reviewed publications. Now she was smuggling potentially dangerous alien life forms into her lab, violating dozens of international laws and scientific protocols. Her facility, a converted mountain lodge far from prying eyes, had everything she needed. She'd built it for her independent research, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, and most importantly, privacy. As she carefully transferred the eggs into a modified incubator, Sarah began documenting everything. If she was going to break every rule in xenobiology, she would at least maintain rigorous scientific standards. The egg's energy signatures stabilized in the incubator, their pulsing light settling into a steady rhythm that reminded her of a heartbeat. Sarah spent that first night watching them, taking measurements and notes, trying to understand what she'd found. The rational part of her mind cataloged possibilities: unknown reptilian species, artificial constructs, or genuine extraterrestrial life forms. But as she watched the light play across their surfaces, patterns shifting like thoughts made visible, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since she was a child reading fantasy novels under her blanket with a flashlight. Wonder. Pure, unfiltered wonder at the impossible made real. "Whatever you are," she spoke softly to the eggs, "I'll protect you. I'll understand you. And maybe, just maybe, you'll help us understand we're not alone in this universe." She didn't know then how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how deeply these beings would change not just her life, but the fate of humanity itself. As the first light of dawn crept over the mountains, Sarah Chen, respected xenobiologist and lifelong servant of pure science, had become something else entirely, a guardian of mysteries that would reshape our understanding of life itself.